evening and welcome to the Simsbury Board of Education regular meeting. Today is February 11, 2014, and I am calling the meeting to order. With that, we will have our first public audience session. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the board may do so. Please state your name and address. All right, seeing no one at this moment, we will move on to board and administrative communications. And we will start with Jacob, our high school Board of Ed representative.
Well, we've recently passed the 100th day of school, so we are on the downhill stretch to the end of the school year. This past weekend, the Les Miserables show had their final performance on Sunday, and it was a resounding success. For those of you who didn't have a chance to attend, it truly was a great show, and a huge credit to everyone involved. The actors, of course, but also the faculty, the parents of the actors, and everyone who attended. We had 8th grade parent night last week at the high school. It was great for the 8th graders to come and have a look. I had an opportunity to present for FBLA and the business education program to incoming freshmen. The girls indoor track team finished runner-up in the Class LL team classification last week, and we also had a number of individual winners for the state level. Girls hockey is having their senior night tomorrow at 5 p.m. against Darien. Our undefeated wrestling team has a matchup with Farmington tomorrow at 6 p.m., and that will decide the CCC title. Student Council is sponsoring a team handball competition on Thursday evening, though that's likely to be rescheduled. We're thinking with the weather. And Battle of the Bands is a week from Friday, one of the highlights of the year at 7:30 p.m., so I would encourage everyone to come to that.
We're good.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Okay. Susan.
I was at the 8th grade orientation at the high school, and it was my last one, and it was very well done. Jacob, you were great. I heard your speech there. It was terrific. And I did want to say, just on Les Mis, I saw a great factoid today. Over 4,800 tickets were sold to Les Mis over the 6 performances. And just what a great testament. And it was a fabulous show. Congratulations to everybody.
No, I'm good. Thank you, Lydia.
Good.
I'm good.
Chris.
Nothing, Lydia.
All set?
Mike. Tara.
They also had the 6th grade day at Henry James, so everyone's getting ready to transition. So it's exciting.
And I believe we've also started our kindergarten orientation, so those are well on their way for next year. So as the senior class exits, we bring in our new kindergarten. We also have Kate Roberts, who is our teacher college staff developer, and she will be in district tomorrow and maybe Thursday, but Jacob says we might not have school on Thursday.
Now the whole student body will be happy. But not projecting it.
At least not after school activities. No, yeah, at least not after school.
So, but she'll be working at Simsbury High School on Wednesday, and Thursday scheduled at Henry James to do some literacy across the content areas. So it'll be interesting to engage the high school teachers for the first time this year in that kind of professional development.
Nothing at this time, Lydia. Burke. Matt.
I just wanted to echo the sentiments on Les Mis. I had an opportunity to go myself, and there was quite a bit of chatter with the couple behind me, and it was a gentleman that just kept repeating over and over again throughout the performance how impressed he was with the talent level of the kids in Simsbury. And he's been coming year over year to all the performances, and I finally turned around and I said, you know, you're really making the superintendent really proud here. And we had a nice conversation, but to Jacob's point and Susan, so many people attended. I think it was the best attended performance that we've had historically. And what a nice community event. What a nice thing for everybody to be able to have an opportunity and come to see. And certainly our students at the forefront of that really did an amazing job.
There were a lot of alumni that came home the first
Yeah.
weekend, which was even fun to see. The show I went to, there were a lot of kids who've been in previous shows who were there to support the program as well. And I think that shows a lot for our schools as well.
Good.
Absolutely.
Good. And I too I attended Sunday's performance, so I was able to get in there. And again, it was just an incredible performance. It's going to be interesting to see what will be performed next year. Not to top hop this one, but it was really great. So kudos to the students and of course to all the staff and community members
Yeah,
that
let's put everything together.
that put this together. It was really something, and then all the compliments and comments were all just very positive. So it was just a great performance. So, and with that, briefly, I mentioned that I was away in D.C. This is the time of year where we're on Capitol Hill and we're pounding Congress and meeting with our congressional delegation about what's going on in D.C. And just to highlight this year, when we were able to meet with all the 6 congressional delegation, 2 senators, and the other Congress people, which was real important. We spent 2 days in cold Washington, and a big piece of this was really to talk about the local school board governance, and then of course the federal funding in education, because everything is top down. So part of that was the implementations and the money back to Title I and IDEA, and also the reauthorization of ESEA are the really big areas that our congressional delegation in D.C. heard. We were able to meet with all of them. They asked a lot of questions about our districts on the home front. Our thoughts about this, where we're going with this, because of course Governor Malloy, was unveiling his budget while we were in D.C., so everything was kind of coming at once. But as you know, the federal funding is the key area, which they're going to be looking at this year. And also the other part is supporting the local school districts to maintain their existing programs, and because it isn't going to be coming down, from the state level, and the federal funding piece of it is important to maintain where we are in local districts around the country. So this was a very worthwhile, exhausting trip, but it was important for our Congress to know how we felt. We represent districts all around the country, and it's interesting because we all have the same thoughts coming from districts representing school children and districts. And when we were on the Hill, we are one collective voice, and it's important that Congress hears that. We also had the opportunity to have Senator Chris Murphy speak to us, and he is a very strong proponent of public education and restoring funding. So we do have an ally, and we're very fortunate to have someone of our own delegation there on Capitol Hill that is in our party. So that's it. The other piece is the legislative breakfast is scheduled for Thursday, but you'll have to make the decision because Governor Malloy is planning to come. So maybe we'll just have his office call you to see if we'll have school or not. But it is still scheduled for Thursday morning. We'll find out tomorrow if it will be canceled. If so, it will be snow date on February 20th. And I think a few of us are planning to attend. The governor will be there in attendance, and of course our Senator Witkos and Representative Hampton. So we will let you know where we'll be on Thursday morning, if not. Well, that's it.
Great.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to. Okay, we have recommended actions. Exhibit 1, approval of minutes of January 28th, 2014 meeting.
So move.
Do I hear a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We are now on to Exhibit 2, adoption of 6-year capital improvement plan.
I'm going to have Burke kind of talk through the
Absolutely.
process a little bit and the exhibit he put together, because it would be our last opportunity if we had any questions or wanted to bring anything in the plan up for discussion tonight. So, Burke, go ahead.
Okay, you have both your budget binder tab, where I would suggest that if you kind of layer the history of these conversations and drafts that we've had of the 6-year CIP, and then also in your packet. As the memo outlines, under the charter that was changed last year, and this is the second year, tonight is the last meeting for the board to finalize its adjusted plan, which then goes to the first selectmen, and there will be an overall plan that includes all town and Board of Ed projects that will ultimately come out of that. Because there's no longer a town meeting process for the capital projects such as ours that don't trigger the threshold to go to referendum, those will essentially be handled as they were last year through the Board of Selectmen process coming up in the next several months. So we had updated the board at your last meeting about the staff level conversations that Matt and Mary Glassman, Tom Cook, and myself had to try to bring back to the Board of Finance that plan that showed a 7-year debt guideline and how we would show them that could be done given the existing list of projects. This evening, we don't have any new information for you in terms of the project that was most recently added at your last meeting was the boathouse roof. Continue to be working with the town staff as was requested to come back and give a sort of a more detailed survey of the condition of that building and then get some better cost estimates. So I guess we'd just ask you to understand that $75,000 is a simple placeholder at this point, and there'd be time throughout this process working with the town to get a better number for that. So again, this is your last opportunity to ask questions, and we're prepared to do that and try to provide any final issues that you might
I
have.
think we'd have to move to accept it, and then during discussion, we can.
Absolutely. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Any discussion now on it?
Yeah, the one thing I would want to talk a little bit more about is kind of the Squadron Line main office project that's right now scheduled for a 2016 date. I just think that given the fact that some of that is due to the audit that was done from a security perspective, that to kind of defer that another year, doesn't sit well with me personally. It's just something that I think in terms of priorities, it would kind of be a greater priority for me in terms that it's in part a security issue. So I don't know if
I wholeheartedly agree with Tom. I kind of had the same thought process myself, is that given that we were trying to prioritize all our security concerns, Squadron would be really the last, if we do Henry James, Squadron's that last one hanging out there. And is there a way for us to maybe move that forward sooner?
Yeah, the board can certainly do that this evening. I would just point out that the $500,000 estimate has been on the books for some period of time, and we've asked the architect that did the original estimate many years ago to come back out, and Meg and Steve Twitchell and myself will be getting an updated estimate for that. So we would have to pass along any new information should you choose to move this up to the first year 2014-15, and then we would obviously forward that to the town also. But it would be a similar situation to Henry James, where at this point while we expect there would be some level of potential reimbursement, we're still looking at what is the best way to maximize potential grant funding for that, whether it be security grant or school building, and so that's a little bit of background that I would just add for you.
Any other
I think
comments?
I appreciate the concern I would love, does Squadron Live have enough cameras at that door? Is there enough surveillance of that door for a concern?
The surveillance is similar to the other facilities. I don't think it's a surveillance issue. The feedback we got from the audit is that there's no substitute for sight lines.
Yeah.
And what you do not have at Squadron Line,
It's a sight
because the parking is all done either out front of that door or to the opposite side, you don't have natural sight lines to folks walking up to the door.
But you'll
So-
never have a sight line to the back parking lot, is that correct? I mean,
But people don't enter through the back.
Like getting through the back door.
So it's essentially, the plan would essentially be a flip of the nurse's office
and the regular
with
office.
adding an entrance through probably through
Oh, I
the
see.
through the
That's
brick
what I
there,
see.
so that you would be able to naturally see people as
it does
they
seem
walk
simple.
upon the
My concern
the
is though
site.
that the Henry James is, to me, a bigger priority because you actually get human beings in the building before, on their way to the office before anyone.
Well, it's similar at Squadron, because you can bypass the office at Squadron as well.
But you're not right in the middle of classrooms.
Yeah, I think,
That's what
I mean,
makes me
moving.
a little bit more concerned. 'Cause if
I
you had
would-
to do one or the other,
Yeah,
I'm
but
always worried.
I don't think that's what we'd be looking at. I think, I don't want to kind of impose my will on this, but I think my take would be that
Add the
Add
extra.
it, yes.
we would
not
move
replace.
that up. We would have discussion with, as we have before, with Mary and Tom Cook, Burke, and I
See if we can put it in.
about, okay, what does this look like with your projects now under the 7%? But I don't think I would want to get in a conversation at this point of weighing that versus something else and
No.
trying to figure. I think it's strict. You know, what I'm hearing is, we did prioritize security. We did have the Board of Finance kind of talk us through, hey, if you have security measures that you want to bring to the forefront, do that and talk about that, that it may warrant
What
just
do we
bringing
think
it
the
up into
reaction would
current
be to
year.
this if we added it?
I mean, I think it's still in the planning process of looking, collaboratively downstairs with what they have and having that conversation.
Would it be
Because-
Don't know.
feasible for us to kind of get an update quickly enough to move this along, or is that not something we could consider?
Timeline-wise, we
Timeline-wise.
have to, the board has to approve this by the 15th to move it forward.
Just,
But I mean, if we move it forward, would we be able to get credible information to have those conversations downstairs to see where it all fits if we're talking to the Board of Finance? Or can we get quick enough turnaround on whether that 500,000's totally outdated and it's more like 700, or?
I don't have a specific date that we get it by, but I know that at a conceptual level, that's what we've asked Peter Child to help us out with, and I'm sure it could be we could be given a reasonable estimate before this process is over.
Before long.
But I can't speak to what date for what exact.
Right, I'm
date.
not looking for an exact date, but if you think we get credible information so that the conversations we have would be reasonable.
So Matt, in order to kind of move forward, right, we have a choice basically. If we accelerate it to 2015, then you would have those conversations downstairs to figure
Correct.
out
Yes.
if it's workable. Is
Correct.
that
Right.
yes, because Board of Finance did, from what I'm hearing, is that you have an interest in moving this one forward, pushing it ahead of a year. With that conversation going forward for downstairs, because as Matt said, we do not know where they are yet with this.
Right.
But if we do recall, Board of Finance did say, discuss with board, when it comes in terms of any security projects, any security issues that we may have, that we can discuss this. Where this will go, we're not quite sure.
Right, so the way I see it is we could approve the plan as is, or we could amend the motion and approve the plan. Somebody could make a motion to approve the plan with Squadron Line, and then we would move it forward, and Burke and I would have those
Those
conversations.
conversations after.
Well, Matt, can I just
Two options.
add, if we're talking about moving $500,000 into up a year, I mean, I'm just looking at, I don't remember the history on the turf field, track maintenance, tennis court replacement. I mean, do we have to, at the same time, consider if there's anything else that we'd be willing to move further out so that we're not creating quite, I mean, if we move the 500,000 up, we're creating 500,000 additional in 2015. Is there anything else that could be delayed a year if we're saying that's going to be a higher priority? I don't know, I'm just asking the question.
We don't have $500,000 worth of projects to move out that I see. I think, again, as Matt mentioned, ultimately, these are your recommendations, but the first selectman has the responsibility to take all town projects, including Board of Ed, and figure out how best to move that forward.
Right.
So this is more expressing your opinion of priority, and then, we're back to that financing question, and there has not been an official Board of Selectmen list of projects, to my knowledge. It's also at the staff level. So you have to see what ultimately, all projects for this first year, which is actually the year that we're asking for funding, how those all lay out. So I think it's premature to start shifting things around. Just to
Try to offset it.
remind you, earlier in this process, we actually moved the tennis court project out a year. It was in this current year that we'd be talking about. We split out we brought a portion of the track and the turf field project. We brought the portion through that would involve just replacing the top layer of the track, which the advice that we received was that was going to minimize costs, because if we don't get it done this summer, it will end up being a larger, more costly project. So I would just caution us to not try to save a couple $100,000 now and then turn around and have other, other problems that are going to be more costly. I think you've done a good job of doing the minimum maintenance that we need to get done.
So how would this work? If we were to decide that we wanted to bring the 500,000 forward, then that's what gets forwarded on, and then it could get bounced back?
Right, this is your plan. It's a planning document, so you can vote tonight to amend, to move it into this project into the 2015 column. But nothing, there's no guarantee that everything in here makes it into the final plan.
Period.
That's not
Right.
that's not our purview here. At this
With or without the 500 in there.
Right,
Yeah.
what we have there already might not get approved.
Well,
Absolutely.
okay, but I guess here's my question. If we move 500,000 up to 2015, are we beyond what was the expected threshold that we would be submitting in this capital improvement plan for 2015?
Be more than what was previously shown in that administrative draft, which again, the catch-22 was we were asked to do an exercise that wasn't a final version. We did not have the Board of Ed's, formal
Approval.
vote on all 6 years of it.
Right.
I'm happy to move it forward, but I guess my question is, do we know what the capital financing amount is, given what's rolling off debt load from last year? I mean, how much is it this coming up, do we know? What are they gonna give us, both boards?
There was, the report that PFM, the advisors did, showed all of the projects, showed what was rolling off and what was available, and showed us how to structure that.
What are you looking at?
There were a lot of other projects in this first year. Obviously, we would have to go back and verify, are there grants to offset any of the things such as our Henry James project. We don't have final numbers is really what I'm trying to say. We could have adjustments
Yeah.
to any of the projects.
upon if they bond or-
They could tweak
Right.
it over 7%. It was a theoretical, but yet a real process where they said they demonstrated for everybody that you could do this with this list of projects. So yes, if you make a tweak in 1 year, you can throw that, but there's also choices about whether you finance all of it. They could choose, the Board of Finance could say, we're gonna take some out of reserves for one smaller project this year.
Right.
So I think we're
And we
There
won't
seemed to
know.
be
Sure
some
to say we
willingness
know
on their
exactly
part to
what
use
that
reserves
number
for
is.
that as well, especially if it was related to security. And we
Early on,
didn't,
right.
Early on,
as it was, we didn't use the money they gave us for the lots, did we? Didn't we finance that in a different way?
Correct.
We did get,
Covered that from the
covered
operating
that from the
budget.
operating
Right.
budget, and then we got a budget, we got permission to utilize that for additional projects,
Right, so,
which we're in the process of doing.
I mean, I'd be comfortable moving it forward to this year and just being able to have the conversation, because I feel like this is our chance to maybe finally get the security right in the best way in all of our buildings, as close as we can get it at this point.
Any further discussion?
I agree, especially since looking at what we've got in 16, I mean, I hate to come up with some other big projects that might cause us to get
Bounced
pushed back
again.
even further.
Anybody else? Mike?
No, I'm fine if we want to move it ahead.
All right,
I'm okay with that.
all right, we have a motion on the table.
So we're going to vote no on that, and
Or once you
So I think you
So we can amend-
can amend the
oh, we
motion
can
to
amend
include
the
the
motion.
squadron line.
made.
Right, can I have,
Yeah,
would like
so
to,
you made the initial motion, so I
All
think
right.
you can just,
So I'll amend my motion to include the squadron line main office project in the fiscal year 2015.
second. Any further discussion on the amended motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
okay.
Thank
And Burke and I will
With
keep
the-
you informed as we move forward with that and communicate with Mary.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. It was good discussion. It was good to hear. It's important to hear the board's perspective as we move forward with this, and as we are not quite sure where this will end up, but it's important to keep it going. All right. We are now on to, okay, we're going to change the order of the agenda items before you, so now I will need a motion to take up the 2014-2015 budget item before the Facilities Enrollment Task Force update. Can I have a motion?
So move.
And second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes. All righty.
All right. Great. So I have Erin's gonna,
I'm running the
all
PowerPoint.
right, she's gonna walk us through the presentation, and I'm pleased to have an opportunity tonight to put together our budget presentation and move it forward to you. And I think we've had some really positive and thoughtful conversations along the way about the different drivers that will lead up to this budget presentation. So we'll certainly have time for questions either as we go through or at the end. Either way you want to do it is fine. So we'll start with, I don't have that slide on mine, but okay. All right, we have three parts of the presentation. We're going to talk about budget context, return on investment, and then the main drivers.
Maybe that was my slide.
Great. So the overall amount of this budget is $65,878,317. It's a 1.48% increase over last year's funding level, an increase of $959,448. So that's the budget we'll be presenting to you this evening. Anytime we go through and plan a budget process, go ahead to the next one. Thanks. We look at our vision and our core beliefs, and we want to make sure that we're demonstrating fiscal responsibility. And I think that this budget represents both of those things. And the second piece I wanted to talk about briefly, in a time of much change, and I think as we have certainly paid attention to what's going on with the media and with educational reform, it's really important that we're thoughtful in how we manage and support change effectively in our organization. So we'll talk about that quite a bit. How we've tried to do that collectively as a Board of Education and reinvesting dollars over the course of the past several years. This is a slide that is familiar to you, but I think really helps us to frame the context of our budget planning in terms of upward and downward pressures that help us in our planning process to keep the costs down. Enrollment being a key one of those pressures, the Connecticut and local economic climates, things that we need to be cognizant of. And we've had conversation already at prior meetings about the Board of Finance request that we look at different budget scenarios separate from my superintendent's presentation and talk about what the impact of those scenarios would be. And we will start that process tonight a little bit later on. Also pressures that continue to drive cost upward as we move through and try to move forward our school district. So insurance and pension, we're aware that those are big drivers in our budget. Innovations in technology, teaching, learning, and assessment. I'll touch on those a little bit this evening as well. Responding to special education needs, and of course, the reforms and mandates, particularly of on the assessment side with the Smarter Balanced Assessment coming into play this year in a pilot sense and moving forward into next year. To set a little bit more of the context, we have a visual here. This is a visual of the instructional core. We talk about this quite a bit with our teachers, with our administrators. And the point I want to make is that we want to align our priorities and our resources with the needs of our students and the needs of our teachers and how we support our curriculum. And this is a relationship that we talk about often that, if you make a change in instructional practice, it's going to impact the content, which will impact the student experience. All these things are interactive. So I put the visual up there tonight to consider when we talk through the budget process and we talk through different areas of reduction, how we make decisions in one area, whether it be with staffing, whether it be with students, whether it be with our curriculum development. It'll have ripples and it'll have impacts on other areas. So I think this is a visual that brings kind of that to light, and it's something I know with our administrators in the audience is something that they're very familiar with when we talk about instructional practice. To paint a little bit of the further context, what I've done so far in our planning process is we've collected data from districts where superintendents have now presented their initial budget presentation. So we've collected data from 63 other districts. And this is something we'll continue to update the board on as we go through the process. And you can see of the 63 districts, our proposed 1.48 proposal is, it's about 95, it's 95% of the districts are coming in at a higher percentage. Now, a lot can happen in different budget processes in different towns, but we talked at our last meeting about the fact that our 5-year average is about a 1.5, and we found ways to reinvest effectively in our educational system and do so with a responsible budget number. And I think this number and the evidence of the data that we've put forward right now is supportive of that. So I wanted to show this visual. The yellow contrasting our districts are DIRG B districts. Those are our comparable districts to date. I think the average DIRG B right now is close to a 3, about a 2.9%. This is a slide we've talked, I know, quite a bit about enrollment over time, so I'm trying to make a new visual that'll keep you interested in our conversation about enrollment. But
This one's intriguing.
yeah, this is a historical look. So we go back to the binder to as far back as we have data collected on enrollment and on budget increases. And essentially, you have up the vertical left axis are the enrollment numbers. So the brown line that goes horizontally represents enrollment trends over time. The other line represents corresponding budget increases in those years. So for example, to the left of that first vertical green line, a declining enrollment trend in the 80s with increasing budgets. I mean, certainly some unique things that went on during that time period with the Teacher Enhancement Act, but it gives you an idea of what it looks like when we're asked to correspond decreasing budgets with enrollments. And I think you can see when the enrollment started to pick up in the 90s, budget increases picked up, but to varying degrees. No real consistent presentation of a budget number. The decline of our enrollment from a peak of about 5,000 students or so in 2005. And you can see where our budgets have been in the red circle over the last 5 years. So I think this board's efforts to be consistent with moving forward budget proposals while improving the school system have been pretty successful. And again, I would bring to light that 5-year average of 1.5 is certainly the lowest historical average that the board has put since we've collected data since the early 80s. When you take a look across different staffing areas, I know when we spoke to the Board of Finance at our last meeting, they asked some questions about certified employees versus non-certified versus administrative. So what I'm demonstrating here is from 2008-9, a 5-year look, to 2013-14, the enrollment reduction of 578 students, but corresponding staff reductions across the different areas. Certified staff, which is primarily our teaching positions, non-certified, secretarial, paraprofessional, and then administrative positions, where we've gone down 3 administrative positions since 2008 and 9. So that kind of gives a snapshot that I'll move forward with this information to the Board of Finance as well. They wanted to see how it separated out at different staffing categories. So the fun part of the budget presentation is we get to talk a little bit about the positives in our school district and celebrate our successes. And I think that's an important part of every story you tell when you move forward a budget on an annual basis. And the first piece we wanted to respond to a little bit was out of conversation that arose at our last Board of Education meeting about different things we've put in place over the course of the last 5 years that have really helped to move forward our district. And as I would honestly say, position us pretty well from a programmatic standpoint to respond to some of the challenges that we're being faced with in mandates right now. really program improvements, in doing so while having an average budget increase of 1.5%. So I'm not going to read through each one of these on the list, but the fact that we've expanded our Simsbury Reading Intervention program now in grades K through 6 and really providing great services with certified teachers for our at-risk readers, increasing access to technology, certainly full-day kindergarten. Our opportunities at Simsbury High School are unique opportunities. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a few minutes. Our professional learning community initiative, which is now in its, I believe, 8th year or so, is really the cornerstone of our professional development, and we needed resources to make that happen. The support this board provided with instructional coaches last year to really help teachers transition with new practice in the Common Core, we're finding to be incredibly beneficial. Our facilities and enrollment work, which is ongoing work, I know Sue will talk about a little bit later on in our meeting tonight, and certainly our robust curriculum experience. So the reality is we've put all these things into place over the course of the last 5 to 6 years with those budget increases. And we have to respond sometimes to the question of why hasn't your overall staffing level decreased more than it has? Well, the reality is staff was reallocated and reinvested. It's something that this board has believed strongly in, and I believe when we looked at this, Sue, this was about 25 to 28 FTE that we've reinvested over that time to position ourselves consistently and productively for the future. So I think these are programs to be proud of. These are reasons why we're not in a reactive mode all the time when we plan for budgets, is that we've been thoughtful along the way in kind of integrating these things over the past few years. So this is a nice slide that kind of celebrates the fact of Hartford Magazine's rankings of small or medium-sized towns in Hartford County, and I draw attention to the best town for families and schools with Simsbury. So we're proud of what our school system produces. We're proud of the programs we have in place. And I think that it's one of the top reasons why people move to this community. And the school-based information and the ratings were based on graduation rates, per pupil spending, and of course our achievement scores. And we've talked about those at prior times. But an awful lot to be proud of, and something I think that we should put at the forefront of our planning process. Young and hip, number one.
Yeah,
That was the audience chatter. I think, that you heard
I
there,
saw something.
commenting
I
on
saw
the
Neil
screen.
twitching over there. I figured that.
It was the young and hip.
He's young and hip. Too much.
So the Simsbury High School Learning Clusters, this is a piece that we talked about last year when we talk about the things that separate Simsbury and makes learning experiences unique for students. And I know this board met with our administrators a few weeks ago around looking at new Board of Education goals, thinking about a revision of our vision and our core beliefs. And we had some great conversation about what separates Simsbury, what is special about Simsbury. And I think one of the themes that came forward is we provide unique opportunities for our students, and that's something to be proud of. We took a snapshot off of some of the materials that Neil has from his school about our learning clusters. And our learning clusters are unique opportunities for students in various areas. These are just a few of them. We also have engineering, business, and finance. I believe we have 9 clusters in all that provide course sequences for students to really get involved with an area of an interest for them and define their skills over time as they get themselves ready for that next level of either the workplace or for college. We talked about Les Mis, and I think about our theater program, and I think about our music program, and the fact that students have opportunities to practice and engage and develop their skills. It truly are, these are programs that are different than the programs that are offered at other high schools. And I think they're programs that we should be proud about and talk about, because you've invested money in these programs to expand our elective offerings at the high school. So,
And a lot of students participate.
Absolutely.
Start looking at the numbers in these programs. There are quite a few.
When we made the decision to move towards that 8-period day and then have an opportunity to fully staff the elective areas, enrollment rose in those areas tremendously. And I think, when you provide these opportunities for kids and give them the time in the day to take advantage of them, great things can happen. And I think we're seeing that at Simsbury High School. These are a list of different accomplishments, some of them academic. I think we have an awful lot to be proud of from an achievement standpoint. Terriffill was identified once again a second year in a row as a school of distinction by the Connecticut Department of Education. Our CAP scores remain very high, second in the DERG in terms of students meeting all areas of the CAP. Increased numbers of students participating in AP exams, an all-time high at 68%, and students still achieving at high levels. So as we open up more opportunities for students, our students continue to achieve. Great results at the middle school, not only this past year, but historically. And you think of other programs, our athletic programs, the amount of students that participate in those programs, earning all conference honors is really something neat to see. And then a 5-year average of 17% of our students being accepted to Tier 1 colleges is also something to be extremely proud of. So. This is a little chart I put together last year that I brought back the same data this year to kind of see how we measured up. And it essentially is a correlation of when you take a look at our per pupil cost and you take a look at our CAP scores, what does that correlation line up with when we compare with other towns? And I know that there's a lot of other factors that go into student achievement other than dollars, so I don't want to draw a direct say that that's the only link, but I think it's a neat way to kind of look at how we perform against our peer districts. So this represents all the schools in DERG B. If you look at the percentage up the left vertical axis, that's the percentage of students that meet the mark on all of the tested areas of the CAPT. Across the bottom, moving to the, from left to right, is per pupil cost. So you essentially have 4 quadrants. The lower left are districts that have a lower per pupil cost, yet perform lower on the CAPT. You slide that over to the right, those are districts that have a higher per pupil cost, perform lower on the CAPT. The upper right is one district that performed higher on this particular measure but has a higher per pupil cost. And really the point that we're making with this chart, and Simsbury is the yellow, that there is not another district that has a lower per pupil cost and outperforms us on this particular measure. So kind of an interesting way to look at per pupil cost and how it aligns with achievement. I know at this board, Chris, to coin one of your phrases, we talk about above average achievement at a less than average cost, and trying to find different ways to show that our students do incredibly well, and we do so at a per pupil cost that's lower than the DERG B average. We've also talked quite a bit over the past few years about ongoing efforts to keep costs down, to contain some of the major cost drivers. So certainly the Facilities and Enrollment Task Force is one of those areas. We started that work last year, mapped out a 3-year plan to remove the temporary space or the modular space from our elementary schools. We're going to propose tonight after the budget conversation what year 2 of that plan looks like. But overall, we anticipate about $134,000 in savings, estimated savings, year over year once the modular removals is completed. We've also found some non-certified savings from the amount of space we'll no longer have to maintain and clean that we'll talk a little bit about further on in the presentation. Cooperative efforts with the town. We've really increased conversations this year with the town in various areas. Burke is working with the town on a joint effort and with Jason Casey on some fiber optic cable. The town now has a technology task force, which we're a part of, and we've had some really early productive conversations on different places we can potentially collaborate, from staffing to infrastructure to data storage. So while we don't have any of those things complete to talk about, there are ongoing conversations in the future that I think will be beneficial. And certainly the movement we've made with health insurance carrier consolidation will bring us significant future savings, creation of the new high deductible health savings plan, and the defined compensation retirement plans, the DC plans, which will all start to we'll see incremental savings moving forward. So some real efforts over the past year and a half or 2 years here to really mitigate some of these major drivers. So that really brings us to the significant drivers in this budget for 2014-15. We've talked about the reduction of classroom FTE related to that enrollment decline. That's one of the largest offsets that we'll go through, and I'll provide some more details on it, and we've talked about that quite a bit. But we also want to ensure that we maintain our class sizes. That's been an important community value. That's been important to our Board of Education. We have some special education program needs that certainly need to be addressed that we talked in great detail about at our last board meeting. And insurance and pension obligations and new contractual obligations kind of round out that top list of main drivers in our budget. So here are some of the numbers. I know that when I presented my initial overview to the Board of Ed, I had a range of about 1.5 on the low side to a 2.2 on the higher side of the range. Up top are in the additions, if you look at the first 4 items, those are all kind of salary and contract related. Those are rollovers of negotiated salaries and the reserve for unaffiliated that's yet to be determined. Obviously seeing the largest driver of those being the teacher contract with a 1.54 increase, or roughly $1 million increase over last year's contractual value. You also see the impact of our administrative bargaining group. In total is $54,500. I would like to draw attention to the preliminary estimated health insurance number. It's $261,000, or an increase of about 0.4. That is the one significant difference between this presentation being able to be at the low end of the range and what we had initially planned, when I think we had about a 3.5% increase there. We've, in consultation with our insurance consultant, after 6-month review of our claims, we're in a favorable place, and this is an estimate that he has advised us that he feels comfortable with, which has allowed us a little more flexibility within the range to get to that overall 1.48. So that's certainly positive news at this point in the planning process. But up top, when you look at the additions, this is basically assuming, we've talked through this sheet before, that you're rolling forward your organization at the same size. And that would lead to an overall increase of 3.7% in the budget. And then we go down and we look at where we can find offsets to that in the planning process. So we talked about looking real hard this year at other operational efficiencies or other places beyond just certified staff where we could potentially determine some savings based on the fact that we are servicing less students, our enrollment is going down. So those areas are transportation. Through bus route consolidation, we're able to take 2 buses offline and save about $86,000. The modular removal that we will be proposing later on will yield us savings of about $50,000 in utilities. Instructional and office supply reduction, Burke has worked really closely with Kira and his staff to kind of go to a per pupil model on that. And try to refine how we look at instructional supplies, and we've been able to find some cost savings there, and really looking at the equipment requests that were put forth by the buildings and trying to prioritize those. We've been able to lower the baseline set last year by about $70,000. So in those kind of other, we were calling operational efficiencies, it's close to about $250,000 in savings that we were able to find prior to looking at reductions of staff. We've talked through before, we estimate certified retirements in the differential between the outgoing salary and hiring a mid-level teacher. We pick up about $200,000 in savings there. And then the final item is the decrease of the certified staff numbers, of 5 at the elementary section and 7 between the middle school and the high school. So a total of 12 teaching positions that are enrollment related. We demonstrated in prior presentations that even with those reductions, we'll be able to maintain our class size guidelines. So I think that's important to note, is that these are reductions to staff, but these are reductions that don't impact program in a negative way and allow us to continue to move forward and provide the services that we have been providing. So you net that out, and that is where we get to our 1.48% increase. Still in this process, Burke continues to monitor information and talk to outside consultants. So financial unknowns, things we'll continue to look at, OPEB and pension annual required contributions, final medical insurance premiums. I don't expect too much movement off of what we have in this presentation, but we'll continue to look at that information. Bidding on fuel, oil, and gas. Don't believe that we will get to the good on any of that bidding, but we're hoping to stay stable and not see any spikes in any of those areas as we move forward. And the educational cost sharing. The initial governor's budget shows that town aid for ECS is up slightly. Certainly not down, so that's positive news that we can move forward in the planning process, because I know we always move forward, and so does the Board of Finance and the town based on the governor's budget. So pretty positive news on that front. The last piece of this presentation is just to touch again on the areas that we feel we need to add to in terms of resources and dollars to respond to certain needs right now. We've had presentations on all of these, so we can certainly answer more questions if you have them. But these are the areas: the Ready, Set, Go program coordinator, Ready, Set, Go being the specialized program that we house at 2 of our elementary schools, that's pre-K to 6th grade, that services the needs of a certain segment of our autistic student population. Support staff to support those students in that program, and I'll speak more to that in a few minutes. Our out-of-district tuition, we have seen an increase in the number of students that we are placing on the outside, roughly 5 students. These are needs that are impacting our current year budget that we need to find a way to cover, and we're doing that effectively, but we need to budget for appropriately next year so we're not in the same position. And the last item being increasing the access to some of the technology that we talked about, and there's a staffing request that goes along with that as well.
That was included in the 1.48.
All of this is included in the 1.48, yes. I have that under, I lumped it under, I should have delineated that time, I lumped that under program improvement, I didn't have it broken out. Thank you. This is a snapshot just of the Ready, Set, Go program and the enrollment. It's just a visual we had talked about last time, and when we talk about growth of the program, this is actually 1-year growth that we're talking about. So we started the program on October 1 of this year with 27 students in the program, and right now we have 6 additional students in that program. And these are students that require a certain level of support to be successful within our schools, a level of support that the program has historically provided. Again, we are providing that support to these students current year by utilizing some grant funding in the meantime, but definitely need to budget for that next year as we move forward. The next chart is a quick snapshot of the out-of-district tuition dollars. You can see historically where we've been over the course of the past 5 years, and the spike we've seen roughly of about $500,000 in this past year, which is why, again, we budget for this net of excess cost, so we're requesting about $260,000 in additional funding to address this moving forward into next year. Technology is the last piece, and I know Aaron presented this piece to you at the last meeting and really broke it down in terms of increasing access to technology, but really thinking about the assessment and the teaching and learning aspects of technology. And on the assessment side of things, we need to be prepared for the Smarter Balance assessment, which does take a toll, a significant toll on our infrastructure and the amount of devices that we have in the district to be at the ready, to be able to have seamless access, operate in a I guess, a fast manner, be ready to work and engage students in the assessment. So we have a trial run at that this year. I think we're positioned as well as anybody to respond to this, but we're not positioned adequately to live like this in the future, So we need to think thoughtfully about that. And in the funding of $200,000 in the overall technology, about $150,000 would be utilized for Chromebooks, which we've had great success with early on in terms of speed, reliability, and access for our students and for our teaching. So teaching, supporting transformational practice. Teaching is changing. The way we utilize technology, we want our teachers to engage our students through technology, and we have to have ready access for them, and that translates right to the learning aspect of things. So I did include some data on the bottom that's interesting, right? We've requested one additional tech support person in our current budget, and I thought it would be prudent to go back and try to demonstrate a snapshot of the number of devices that we had 5 years ago, the number of devices we have now, and that we're trying to manage this with the same number of staff. And the reality is, and this is not a knock on our current staff, we're unable to keep up with the demand and some of the issues and challenges that are creeping up in classrooms for both our teachers and for our students. We're just not staffed adequately to be able to deal with it. So we think after sitting with Jason and looking at the data and talking through things, that an additional tech would allow us to really get out into the buildings and meet the needs of people so that we do have that seamless transition. But we definitely have a challenge in this area that we're faced with. When you break out these program improvement cost drivers, you can see the program improvements and supports for special education total about $550,000, or 0.85% of an increase. The technology between the Chromebooks and the repair technician are $200,000, so kind of a total of new program needs of $750,000, or a 1.16%. And to answer your question, again, Tom, I think it was a good one. All of that is figured into, and if we can just go to the last slide, into the total 1.48 increase. So I do believe the 1.48 is fiscally responsible, but I also can honestly say I think it moves us forward in a direction where we'll be able to provide the services in a pretty positive way next year, and support special ed the way they need to be supported, and get this next level of technology work that is on our doorstep and we need to respond to. It's not like we can't respond in a timely and supportive fashion. So I can answer any questions, or my team can answer questions that you have at this point. I have one more slide to show after this if there's no questions on this, and then we can kind of talk through how we want to lay out the balance of the information tonight. Because I'm feeling like I'm talking too much.
We don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
We're listening very attentively.
I mean, Lydia, I really don't have any questions on the content. So, I mean, if we're at a point for general observations, I'll share mine, but otherwise I'll wait.
You ready for questions? Or you want to
Sure,
continue
and-
on to the? Oh, it's non-public is the next.
Yeah, I have, let me do that real
Yeah,
quickly.
and then
I have
just-
one slide remaining, and it's just to demonstrate the non-public school portion of the budget, which, just as a reminder, that's health services that we're mandated to provide to private schools and to parochial school in town. The transportation as well, and some of the cultural and recreation field line items, which is basically field maintenance. Burke has a line item detail that he'll hand out later in the evening tonight, and we can ask specific questions on this, but it's a very small portion of the overall piece of the puzzle that would increase by $2,338. So with that, Chris, if you have comments or questions, I think now would be a good time, and then Burke is going to, just to lay out so you guys understand the kind of the rest of the process. Burke has some detailed information on the tabs that we wanted to go through. Yep. We have that next grain of line item detail that Burke was just going to highlight some of the main drivers and how they line up with that next layer of detail, but then give you time to go back and absorb that a little bit more, and we can vet that on the 25th. And then what I was going to do, the last piece of the budget presentation I was going to do is meet the initial request of the Board of Finance and demonstrate what it would take in terms of reduction scenarios to take my 1.48 down to a 1.0 on budget, and then we can certainly have comments or questions on those things. But I didn't know if people wanted to
With that,
talk about this piece of the presentation, or we can.
yeah, I think
move forward.
it's a good time to open up some discussion. Chris, you got a few questions?
No, I don't really have any questions.
Or any comments?
Just kind of my reaction. So I can do that after Burke goes
right.
through his piece. Or,
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we do that, and then we
Great.
can
Just to
circle back.
Just to highlight a couple of the new tabs that you have to insert in your books this evening. Wanted to highlight the grants and revenues. Last week, if you go towards the back, you have a separate tab for grants, which were discussed. That's our state and federal grant. We've got a revenue tab, and we'd like you to put in that the document that's titled Simsbury Public Schools Expenditures, including general and restricted grant funds. It'll eventually be part of the budget presentation, this pink page, but find that and insert that one.
All right, so grants, go back.
You want that
Goes
under
right
revenue,
after
not
grants.
grants?
Goes right after grants.
Right after.
Which one, please?
And those two are
Oh,
essentially linked.
I think mine is mixed. Probably my own fault. This one. Company. Two.
Ends with this.
And so that one. Oh, I don't even know what it is.
There,
That one?
that should be.
No, this is a different one.
Just talk to me.
Yep, so if you have that sheet in front of you,
I might not have it.
this is the format we started last year.
That's all right.
This is really divided into two parts. The top third is really showing you the total estimated expenditures, both from restricted grants and from the operating budget. And this is essentially that which we call a gross budget. And then when you net out the restricted state and federal grants, which we talked about last time, we estimate to be a little over $3.3 million. We're left with the general fund budget that Matt has explained this evening. So that's really what the first top of this does. It gives us that total picture. The rest of this page is really about educational revenues that go to the town, directly to the town. Largest of which is education cost sharing, as Matt highlighted earlier. And this was just put together with the data that came out from the governor's budget this week. And you'll see that overall revenues to the town are slightly up that relate to education, going from 5.73 million to 5.79 million. And very little change there. So that gives us the big picture. The second page behind there just gives detail that you can go back and review as to what are the sources of revenue from these various aspects here. It just gives you more detail that you can review. Okay. Any questions on that information? The other item that would be coming next in your tabs would be a tab for capital non-recurring, or CNR. And that is a one-page document that just outlines the major categories of proposed funding. And then there should be a sheet behind that that helps to explain how we spread out those costs over 5 years. And that schedule makes its way into one of the line items in the budget summary that we're going to get to. We were advised by the Board of Finance at that three-board meeting that if we looked at the amount of spending that we proposed last year, that would be an acceptable range. So we're at $570,500 again. And there's a variety of projects that are able to be done. It allows us to replace flooring, to do plumbing and electrical work, interior improvements, including things like lockers, some exterior work, and then equipment. We annually use this to replace school buses and other types of vehicles and equipment. So we're looking at the reduction of our bus routes from 31, proposed to go down to 29. Will help us with the replacement of our fleet. We certainly don't need to replace 3 this year. We tend to do between 2 and 3 per year, and we're proposing to replace 2 for next year. that's a little bit of background on capital non-recurring. Questions on that? Also, there's a handout on cooperative efforts, I believe you received this evening, and that can go in. We don't need to, Matt's already given some of the updates on that. That's for your information. And then the budget summary tab, which got for you, we'd like to talk a little bit about just where some of those major drivers are.
The line item.
And I put that
detail,
next,
Bert?
yeah,
Yep.
that's the line item sheet, and we put that right behind the CNR.
Yeah.
Everybody has those pages. Okay, I'll start just pointing out a few of the major drivers. We break the budget into major categories, and the first category, general control, we really didn't have any major drivers to highlight there. The largest portion of the budget is the next category, which is instruction, and within that we have some of the salary and wage increases for both our supervisors and principals and teachers. Obviously, with the reduction in the number of sections, our teacher increases were largely offset there. The only major driver within the teacher salary line item is we did have one Ready, Set, Go teaching certified coordinator job, so that's all within that line item. Salaries for support personnel, it's a little bit farther down there, about the fifth line down, excuse me. That includes our paras, our administrative support, some of our non-certified. So the Ready, Set, Go support makes up a large part of that, and actually some of the technology support. So that is where you see most of the increase there. A little bit farther down under instructional supplies and office supplies, you see that combined reduction of 42,000 between the two line items there, the 35,988 and the 6,000 for decreases. So that gets you down to the bottom of that page. The next page, top, the middle of the section, we have the transportation. You see a decrease of 86,700. That's the estimated amount for reduction of the 2 bus routes. In operation of plant, I would draw your attention to the electricity line item area, where reductions in the amount of modulars and usage of electricity throughout some of our buildings. It's a $50,000 estimated decrease. Page 3, maintenance of plant section. Wanted to point out here that we have a new line item called technology equipment replacement. So we have instructional and non-instructional equipment line items that we've had for replacement. Now we have one for our tech replacement plans, and we've taken some of this money. This isn't all new money by any means. It's really some of it is coming from the new technology line item, which we really used to just take everything out of there, and that's coming up towards the end. So we've tried to get a more accurate.
Is that why there was a separate line item for like licensing and software in the earlier section?
That was another new item. Thank you, which is where we moved costs in part from other parts of the budget, because now we have more ongoing costs that we wanted to be able to break out. And
Good line of sight at.
yes,
Where did we have it last year? Where do we have it?
we had the software you're speaking of, or
The technology equipment?
we didn't have this line item, so essentially
So
in
this
the
is really new from-
the new technology equipment budget, which is on the last page, the 270,000 line item last year. We broke up some of the
Yep.
increase that you heard about earlier tonight, some of the Chromebook monies, and some of it are not going to planned replacement for other technology items. So we're now showing it in 2 different places. Also, insurance and pension, you see the estimate still at this point. We hope to have word from the actuaries shortly about our annual required contribution. That we're estimating is a $50,000 increase, and health and other insurance, including OPEB contributions, $261,000. So those were really the major drivers on that page. And then on the last page, we see the out-of-district tuition increase that we spoke about earlier, as well as our reserve for unnegotiated salary. So those are just some of the highlights. I know you'll have further questions as you go through, and Matt and I would encourage you to give us, send us an email, give us a call for things that you'd like a little bit more background on,
Right.
that we can have prepared for the 25th.
Yeah.
Any questions about
Alrighty.
the drivers?
No?
Okay.
Okay. The last piece of the budget information I'd like to go over tonight is essentially the initiating that conversation on the scenarios to try to demonstrate the impact. So I have a handout here. I'm going to work down both ways. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we have enough to come down that way. And I think the best way to go through this exercise is I'll talk through what the reduction would be, try to summarize an impact statement, get through these pieces, and then really open it up for questions if you want to dig deeper into it a little bit. But the exercise we went through was to take the 1.48 budget number that we feel really moves forward the work of the district, and based on a request of the Board of Finance, bring that to a 1.0% increase. So I do, before I get started on this, want to say that this in and of itself was a pretty significant challenge. I just want to be out front in saying that. I think one of the things that made it particularly challenging is we took extra time this year to try to identify other what we called operational efficiencies, and try to utilize those savings to lower the initial budget amount and come in as responsibly as we could. So we have already dipped into a pretty significant reduction in equipment, transportation, as Burke just talked about, utilities, and instructional supplies. So when you start to think about these reductions and think of these scenarios, in an organization such as education, there's not a lot of places to go outside of staff and outside of programs. So when we did start, we tried very hard to stay in a different direction. And we do have the first reduction being an additional reduction of $70,000 from our equipment line item. In terms of impact, and giving you an overall feel, we've already cut $70,000 from the baseline that we funded last year. An additional $70,000 would be a 31% cut to the overall equipment line item in meeting the needs in all 7 of our schools. When we're talking about equipment, not to get too specific on different things, but to give you a feeling, it's things like office furniture, instructional equipment, and things like science, art, music, PE, family consumer science. So we certainly haven't determined yet to the degree of exactly what equipment we would pull and what we wouldn't. But taking this $70,000 on top of the other $70,000 would have an impact. A little bit of our worry, Burke and I, in the planning is that it's kind of the mindset that it moves the challenge out one more year. When you need equipment or you need these things, you have to have a thoughtful replacement plan and way to do them, and you're just basically moving the challenge a year out. And but we wanted to start with the equipment line item and felt that was the place for us to start. The second, it's labeled number 3, but number 3 is a secretarial position, a 1.0 non-certified position. which would be the full value of both the salary and the benefits, which is what you see on the page there. The cut would result, we haven't identified exactly where it would come from yet, but it would be a front office secretarial position. So it would have an impact on that customer service field, that ability to respond to student needs, parent response, staff response, and certainly the workload. We don't feel we're overstaffed in this area, but the workload would need to be redistributed, and we need to be creative in the way that we would move forward and think through that. But that would be an additional cost reduction of $68,000. The next reduction would be a 1.0 full-time position of a regular education paraprofessional. These are positions that we added to 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when we really committed to the professional learning community initiative, particularly at the elementary level. These are positions that allow us to extend the time that teachers have to collaborate and maintain a sense of classroom coverage, so that teachers can get a full hour of collaborative work over the course of the week. These are staff positions that also supervise children during recess time, during lunchtime, and other times throughout the day. So they're positions that have become increasingly important to us over time. Again, we would have to find a way to reallocate those responsibilities, putting more responsibilities on certified staff to make up for the loss of having the non-certified staff there. But that would be an additional $42,000 in a reduction. The next three got, quite honestly, pretty tricky for us. You see there, number 5 is we would take a 0.5 of the 1.0 position that we just presented in the budget to you for tech support, knowing that we still believe we need that position, but that it is a new request. And I feel of the new request, it's the one place that we could potentially look. I feel like all the other requests that are currently in the budget are actually current year needs that we need to budget for next year and really be thoughtful about. But certainly a reduction of this will have a continued impact on our ability to service the growing number of technological devices we have out there, and really respond adequately to staff needs and the needs of these devices. So. But that would be a half-time position. There would be about $37,500. We have had some early conversations with the task force about, is this an area that we could collaborate on a staff member? So that would be something based on the function of the staff member, what that would look like. We'd have to define that. But maybe a potentially a full-time employee split between the town side and the education side is something we could consider. Certainly not ideal for the needs that we have right now, but something to take a look at, and that would be $37,500 in additional savings. The final two positions are a language arts consultant and also an elementary resource position. Those are positions that we've put in place. We've had language arts consultants for some time, but the elementary resource positions were put in place to really help support the movement with curriculum writing, curriculum development, coaching teachers. These positions are folks that work side by side with teachers right now more than ever, actually, in the curriculum adjustments and instructional classroom practice adjustments to support our teachers so our teachers can feel comfortable when they're in front of kids. And I think what's tough in creating these scenarios is you always think what's best in terms of making decisions for our students, which is why I put that instructional core diagram up before, that if we change a model of how we support our curriculum writing and coaching our teachers, that will have an impact on other areas. And these are positions that have become incredibly important, I know, to our administrators in terms of managing change effectively and how we work through. But they're non-classroom positions. So in terms of if we are put in a position where we need to reduce positions, we need to look at non-teaching positions first, because we have talked about the fact that our reductions in staff have kept us within guidelines. I can't go back to any classroom positions at this point without going over guidelines, so which is why you're seeing non-classroom positions. But definitely important key positions, full-time positions that would yield savings of roughly $70,000 each. So as you work your way through those 6 different scenarios, you would be at a little bit off of but right around a 1.0 percent increase.
Can you spend a little time just on number 1? Just because, is that part of your 1.4?
Yes, so number 1, the 1 should actually probably be in equipment, because equipment is the first reduction. 1.48 baseline level is just trying to remind folks, we don't want to lose the fact that we were able to get to the low end of the range through the adjustments in the insurance and through the reductions in the things we've already made.
So that's kind of your starting point.
That's the starting point, is 1.48. The first reduction is the equipment reduction. So with that, I open it up to any questions that.
Hold on, Berg, I gotta ask a question then. So is number 1 isn't a real number yet, it's assuming a couple things, which could be $480,000 higher.
No, that's misleading.
We're not gonna,
That's misleading.
it would not be that. That's where we started from the top end of the range down. We started with the health insurance figure at a possible 5.7 increase, so that was several $100,000 difference there.
Yeah, that just shows the movement, Mike.
That was where we started from with the top of that superintendent range.
So that was a couple months ago.
So that was your 2.2?
Correct. And then we are assuming that OPEB is 70,000 increase. We don't know that for certain. And the pension annual required contribution for our defined benefit plan, that we're assuming is a $50,000 increase, and we don't know yet. So those are still things that.
But Matt, I thought you mentioned earlier that you had seen favorable experience in the ongoing.
Absolutely. The 1.48 with the increase of 2% in the insurance is a number we're comfortable with. It's a number we've been advised on. Based on claims experience, we're fine with. So just to clarify that.
You know, and is there any opportunity to kind of I don't want to say revisit that and see if there's additional flexibility that can be, somehow mitigating this budget? Because again, if we're talking about people versus what we think the ongoing expense would be, I'd much prefer to take down a reserve than allow people.
Yeah, we're hoping to have
more information by next week on
the actuaries' input for your next meeting, and be able to say these things are known.
Okay.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
The year that we added the full-day kindergarten was somewhat similar to this, that we had a very low proposed increase. We looked at a list cutting down to a certain threshold, but we actually asked Diane the question, if we were to look at what would be added back in, getting up to 1.75, 2%, is there something in there, to your point, that would be a significant enhancement? And so I just tossed it out, because I actually think that's a really healthy question to ask. And in that particular year, we ended up with the full-day kindergarten.
Right.
Just any thoughts on anything?
In terms of significant program, no. And I say that only because the amount of change we're engaged with right now, to bring an additional programmatic or large-scale programmatic improvement, I think would be incredibly challenging. Some things we had talked about for future planning are really taking a hard look at our elementary math intervention model and how do we need to resource that and think about that model differently, maybe along the same lines we have with our elementary reading model. But to do that next year, even if we had the support and the go-ahead, I think with the challenges on the plate of administrators and teachers would be really difficult. But some things I can say, if I were in a position to put something back in this budget now, I would probably take an FTE from that secondary combination of 7 and add a full-time position back into that, making that maybe a reduction of 6. only because those numbers aren't firm until Neil does his course enrollment in February, and Brian gets further information on how those class sizes shake out. From a projection standpoint, we're within guidelines, but I know they're a little bit closer than the elementaries are. Elementary is very comfortably within guidelines.
Right.
So that would be something to think about. Another piece is the positive work we've seen with the elementary mathematics coach, but the challenges of having one elementary person get to 5 buildings to support the significant changes instructionally in math has been a challenge. In a world where I felt we might have more flexibility, I would probably advocate for an additional position there. But at this point, not a major program driver. But that's substantial dollars in and of itself.
Right.
That's 2 positions or $140,000.
So it sounds like the one where you feel maybe you have the most risk is the one additional position for the high school based on what the
It's the high school
High
middle
school, middle
combination.
school, high
Yes.
school, middle,
Yep.
yeah.
So how much is that would be added back into the
It's a
budget?
0.1 of the budget.
0.1.
Yeah.
So you're saying you move from 1.48 to 1.58 with that?
Roughly. A position is every 0.1, correct? $76,000 or so. Yeah.
So you're-
Okay. And then my second, more of an observation, is I think we have to explore the request from the Board of Finance to present or look at scenarios all the way down to -1.
Yeah.
I think we have to talk about how we respond to that. From a process point of view, we've always in the past, and I've always felt is the best practice, is to accommodate those requests. I realize this is an extreme, the -1 is extreme in comparison to what we've done in the past, but my general disposition from a process point of view is either fulfill that request, or if we feel it really begins to get into the territory of absurd, go back and renegotiate what we're trying to do, just to avoid them expecting that we're going to them with scenarios down to -1 and we don't do it. I just think we need to manage that in good faith with them.
Right.
And I toss that out just as kind of a general question for the board to talk about.
I really want to see that list.
No, I don't really want to see that
Really,
list, but there's process and there's content. I'm totally comfortable, as I've said before, I'm willing to support a 1 to 2.5% budget as an extremely realistic budget that, I think the way, I can't articulate it better than you did, that meets all of the needs. But I believe process is different than the debate that you have over what's the right number. And when the Board of Finance asks us to look at something, I feel in good faith looking at something is different than saying, yes, we agree. And to not look at something is, in essence, to resist that request. So I just think it's important how we respond to that request in a way that doesn't deny working with them in good faith, that's all.
I agree with, if I may.
Yeah,
I agree with
absolutely.
Chris's point that I think we've had a number of years of a good relationship with the Board of Finance, and that's come by communication and by willingness to kind of talk with them about the guidelines and so on. I do think it's important in for tonight's discussion and the people that are here in the audience or anybody who's watching at home, that I think the whole point of this page getting us down to 1.0 is in response to sort of general guideline information we've heard from. In other words, it didn't come from this board. This board didn't say, we want you to get down to 1. I don't think anybody's there, or I don't think we really know where we are at this point. But, and I agree generally that we ought to see what the -1 would look like. I think it is probably not something I would support, but anyway, I think we should look at it just to see how much damage that would do.
How much more painful and further damage that we
Well,
can.
I am a little concerned about the mindset that we're in right now. And I don't want anybody to try taking my temperature to see if I'm suddenly ill or something, but, I've typically been a budget hawk. But I was a budget hawk when we were talking 6 to 9% budget increases. And I think a lot of us were back then. And to some degree, I continued to be a budget hawk in the first year when we were below 2, because I thought we were getting to where we needed to be for a while. But we're now in the 5th year of that kind of number. And I'm starting to think that we've got to be asking ourselves whether we're putting our district performance at risk. You know, people move to Simsbury and pay a higher tax rate than competitive towns like Avon or Farmington because we've got a great school system. And the metrics historically have supported that. I don't think we want to do anything that's going to erode that. Otherwise, we just end up being a very higher tax town with the same school system as lower tax towns. And I don't think that's the bargain people made when they made the Simsbury and agreed to pay the taxes. As many of you know, or as you all know, I'm in the real estate business, and I hear it all the time, that taxes are high, and the tax rate's high on commercial property, it's high on residential property. We have to give people who agree to pay that tax rate value for the additional taxes that they're paying. So I think we need to be of a mindset that whatever we do here, we've got to be supportive of the system. A couple of things that we've done over the years, and maybe someone can answer the question, but one time, we had 80-something electives. We're down in the 60s, is that right? At the high school?
Overall number of courses is definitely down.
Very
Electives,
much
so.
streamlined. Yeah.
It's fewer courses, but higher enrollment in the courses that we have.
That's the point. That's where I was going with that, is my recollection, one of my concerns from a budget standpoint is we had too many electives, we had very low enrollments in a lot of those classes.
Correct.
We've wrung that out, as far as I can tell, we've kind of wrung that out of the system. That's good. We needed to do that, and it's been done. I'm concerned about, by the way, we raised pay for play and nobody was more on that program maybe than me, but we did it, and we've helped to fund our athletic programs in a serious way. I'm now concerned about our ability to sustain things like a competitive position from a technology standpoint. Can we do it with $200,000 a year and 5,000 devices that we're supporting and growing? That number is going to be 6,000 or 7,000, I would guess, in the next year or two.
Right.
So, how do we do that with $200,000? Anyway, I hope that in the next couple of weeks, the next couple of meetings, that we are constantly sort of mindful of the fact that, and I'll say it again, that the bargain that people make when they buy a house in Simsbury is they agree to pay a higher tax rate than they'll pay in Avon or Farmington because they're getting an extraordinarily different and better school system as a result of that. And I think we got to be very, very careful that in the course of chasing the lowest number we can get to, that we don't do some damage to that. 5 years below 2%, lowest in our DIRG by a fair margin, 3.5% average increase, is that what it was, 3.5%?
Our DIRG?
For our DIRG,
Yeah.
3.5%?
The initial proposals right now are about
This is our-
3.
This
And
is
this is
our
our sixth-year development,
year.
too.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
But the current increases, that slide you put up said the DIRG was around 3.2 or 3.3.
Correct. Yeah.
I think we got to be very careful here. I'm sort of inclined to go with something Chris said a minute ago. I'd almost want to say, well, what could we add in that's going to, and that maybe gets us to a low 2 number that really supports the school system, the quality of the school system that we have to, and I don't want to see any nice to have. What I want to see are things which are really going to support the core stuff that's going to support student performance, because that's what we get measured by.
I will say and this is a question that's often pushed to us on an annual basis that we respond to, is, the enrollment over the FTE. And this is a year where enrollment at the elementary level did fall just right across those different scenarios where you're able to reduce a significant number of sections and keep within the guidelines. That's not a trend that when I look out next year, quite honestly, that we are going to see next year.
That's right.
So this is a year where we were able to offset almost the entire value of the teacher contract increase of $1 million with offsets in reductions. That's not a ratio that you can guarantee every year. So I just want to bring that to light again. That's the main reason why this number is able to come in where it's coming in. Some of those things fell across the numbers the right way, and next year we're just not as, we're not projected to go down as many students as we have in the past. So it's clearly a couple of those grade levels moving to higher class sizes and things just kind of shuffled out right. There are years when they don't. We've seen those, before where you go down 100 students and you can only take maybe 4 FTE. So
Mal, what was the commitment that was made to the Board of Finance? I mean, what was kind of the deliverable that, if you will, that was owed back?
The Board of Finance requested, when we went and presented our drivers, that we show what the impact of a 1% budget, a 0% budget, and a negative 1% budget would be. We talked last time at this board level of we can engage in any conversation, but when you get to those conversations, I honestly need more time with my administrative group, because what you have to do is do a lot of communicating out and about, because, as you can see, the progression of where we are, what falls below this, quite honestly, will jack class size up, and they become larger dollar spreads, and they become program conversations. And those become value judgments for people by the nature of putting them on a list. So, I agree it's important to fulfill the responsibility we agreed to, and I can certainly go back and have conversation with the Board of Finance based on when they see this budget. They haven't seen this yet.
Yeah.
And what those other, Chris, you talked a little bit about, the worksheet that they maneuver in terms of the other assumptions that now we have new information on the town side as well to deal with that we hadn't had when they asked us to create these scenarios.
Well, I don't see
so
any-
there may be some room for dialogue there.
I mean, justifying, again, the balance, but how conservative this budget is, and Mike picked up on it, but you're alluding to something else. The other thing we typically look at is that spreadsheet of the factors coming together, creating a mill rate, and ultimately the tax increase on households. And the Board of Finance, understandably, this year and every year, wants to have as minimum an impact as possible. But as I've pointed out, the factors we're looking at this year are considerably better than what we've looked at really in any of the last 5 years where we've had an increase under 2%. Grand list growth, their willingness to take a look at the tax collection rate, using an honest rate and potentially talking about that use of the honest rate, which is almost $1 million, not just automatically going into reserves, but being used for other situations. We know that our ECS funding this year is actually a little bit safer than we've had in past years. When you actually take a look at, which isn't even in our increase, our revenues are actually going to be a little bit higher than last year. So when you look at all of those factors coming together, I really believe that you can go up as high as 2.5%, work with those factors, and have less of an impact on the individual tax increase than we've had in past years. So I think that's an important consideration. As is, at even at 2%, we are going to be, compared to our benchmark communities, we're going to have lower tax increase than they do. So relative to other communities, our costs are going to be coming down. So.
I also think it's important to point out the number of $1 million increase in salaries has been put out a couple of times tonight. And I think it's important to point out for anybody watching that, that's a very modest increase. It's very competitive. We worked very hard. The committee and the administration and the representatives of our bargaining groups worked very well and very hard together to end up with a contract that's a responsible and fair contract for everybody and on the low end of the scale. So while $1 million sounds like a lot, and certainly $1 million is a lot of money, but in the scheme of where we're at in the world of contracts, it's a good contract. And it in fact,
GWI of 1.4, I think.
Right, and as part of that contract, what we were able to agree on with the bargaining groups were some changes to our health plans that allow us to get better control of the increase in healthcare costs going forward. So all in all, it's a good contract, and no one should walk away saying, well, we're in this because of that contract. But, I think that in a business environment, you can try to price yourself with the competitors and win on price, or you can try to win on, sort of product. And we can't win on price. We don't have the commercial tax base in Simsbury to allow us to offset the taxes that our resident homeowners have to pay. We just simply cannot, there's no feasible way to win on the pricing. So I think we have to concentrate on making sure we're delivering an above average school system, which justifies the somewhat higher residential taxes that people in Simsbury pay. So, and I'm concerned that if we keep doing 1%, that we're challenging our ability to sustain that, and I don't want to see us lose sight of that.
Other thoughts?
I was just gonna ask, from a very tactical perspective, is there an ability to accelerate some of the cost savings initiatives, kind of working with the town, or kind of, I know you talked about the modular, the modular's kind of saving money on a go forward basis. I don't know if any of that's practical, but again, if there's a way to accelerate some of the kind of the cross-functional initiatives or any of the modulars, I think that's something to consider and look at.
Okay.
I just had one comment, Matt, that we've spoken about since that Board of Finance meeting, and that is if you just look at the range of -1 to 1, that there is the concept of minimum budget requirement out there. So roughly for us, it's about a -0.5 would be the point at which you start to get penalized in your ECS payment. So it's counterproductive to even go there. So that would be something that we could have some further dialogue about.
I had an initial
that.
conversation with Peter, ask him about that, but I see a next step is this, me talking to Peter a little bit through these scenarios and getting to feel where we're at. And we have the 25th certainly, where we have time to work through scenarios, if that's still the direction they would like us to go in, and we can come back with a response for any of the other questions in terms of maybe specific, positions or things that we may desire to put back in if the board would support that. So,
Burke, I think your point is fascinating, which I think actually supports showing what happens when you go down that far, because it becomes counterproductive at -0.5. My only concern about informally reaching out to Peter is he really doesn't represent the full board, which I do believe has taken a vote asking us to get to a certain place. And I'm wondering if what part of you can say to Peter is if we try to fulfill the -1%, we're creating a lot of work, first of all. Secondly, possibly creating a lot of pain within the organization. And third, we may in reality just be patronizing them to do it for the sake of doing it. And is there an opportunity for us to get together with them and share where we're at and why we really feel that at least I'm going to speak for myself, I'm not going there, right? Under any circumstances. So could we have a conversation with them about that and have the full Board of Finance respond to that? I just don't want to get a signal from Peter that's not supported by the full Board of Finance, that's all.
Good point. Yep.
I don't disagree with you, Chris. I think that even looking at the -1 makes me uncomfortable, because sometimes I think that while you're going through the process in good faith, if none of us are going to support that, I feel like that is that's just a kind of a fool's errand, and to go through that process and to make all those people nervous about why we're looking at it, and maybe to put something, it just makes me nervous. I would prefer doing what you just said, go to the Board of Finance saying we don't support going that low. It's just not something we as a board, and I don't mean to speak for everybody, but I just don't see it as something feasible for us to even really consider. To Mike's point, we don't want to diminish the school system. It is what gives us all these great magazine quotes of being the best town, top-rated places to live. We start cutting into our school system this severely, I think that's a much bigger problem.
Others? Going back to Chris, we've had this discussion and conversation about having that initial conversation before the 3-board meeting. before we even got to this point. And this is something that I think we had talked about, a few of us, when we were at that meeting, and we
Right.
discussed that, to have that initial discussion to how are we getting to there and why. And I think we unfortunately jumped that, or it was jumped for us without having that opportunity to have that open dialogue about all of this. I think going back to Mike's point, for six years, we've been in the same situation. And I've heard you, Mike, for 6 years echo the same
You saying I
sentiment.
can beat a dead horse?
I think I
Guilty of
have it
that.
quoted that you have said that. I think this year a little bit more intensity, but for 6 years you've said this, where we are, below the 2, and without eroding, because those were words that I think everyone on this board has used. My concern is also going forward next year, and we've had that discussion. What is the future of Simsbury Public Schools? I mean, we know where we are now, we know what we've dealt with, we have enough of history on that, but where are we going forward with this district, with this system, and for the next year, for the next 5 years? And that is a concern. Will we be able to sustain at the level that we are at now? Are we going to be able to sustain what is being required, what is being asked? And I'm just thinking in terms of legislatively, coming back from hearing the federal government in D.C., and it doesn't paint a pretty picture. And then flying home and being in Hartford and hearing what is going to be going on this legislative session, it still isn't a pretty picture. And then bring it down to grassroots level, to local level, it will affect us, and affects us from here on, not just this year, but as we move forward. I know, Ed Committee are going to be looking at a lot of initiatives or a lot of areas that they did not get to move on last year in some of the bills and some of the amendments and things. They're going to be looking at it. One in particular, secondary high school reform. That was pushed back, as many of you may know, many of you district leaders in here and also cabinet. They're going to be looking at some of these areas, because last year we were taken over by school security and mental health. And mental health will be the big one this year that they'll be looking at. So these are other areas that are going to come into play. My concern is when these, at the end of session, what will be passed from the General Assembly is yet unknown. And that is something that is definitely going to affect every district in a way. So that's the other piece of the puzzle as we move forward and looking at where we are in our budget planning, presenting a budget.
What kind of commitment, if any, did the Board of Finance make to look at the variables in their calculations?
I felt there was a commitment to do that based on the conversation that we had that night in terms of tax collection rate. Certainly the new information now on grand lists, so.
I mean, I feel like we've come up with a budget that we think, there's a budget here that we think is
Fiscally responsible.
responsible, and, I'm frightened to go down. I mean, I know that they've asked us to, but, it sounds like it's not something we want to do. But, I'm also a little afraid of kind of coming up with something higher, because that also seems to be kind of going the wrong direction for what they want. But it seems like they want us to kind of come up with some alternatives, in one direction. Meanwhile, it would be nice at the same time to, see what kind of variables can get
Moving
changed.
in.
Yeah.
Why are we
Do everything
afraid
at
of
the
showing
same
them what would happen? Because don't forget the process. We don't dictate our budget. They tell us what goes to referendum.
Right.
Right.
So why wouldn't we put on the table, if you do this, this is what will happen? Because I just think we're losing sight of something here, which is, we're not suggesting we're going to go low, but you need to put out in front of them the concept of what will happen if you do this, because they have that vote. We don't.
Right.
So I guess I wouldn't shy away from saying, here's what's going to happen, folks. You're going to lose the following. Because that's a political decision, not for us, that's for the town.
Right.
So I guess I just wouldn't, I know
I
it gets to a point we don't want to go to, but
Well, I
you
think
got to
we
put
can
it
say
out there.
that. We can put it out there and say we don't endorse any of these,
Right.
we don't
No,
recommend any of them.
I understand that rationale completely, and I think there can be power to that exercise. The difficult part is organizationally, from a morale standpoint, it's an absolute killer.
I hear that, and I appreciate, and I'm again, I
And
think
it's a
you
killer
heard.
for a year because if they see it on
But
this year's
I
list,
get-
they'll know that
I
next
know what
year's
you're-
list will be.
Yeah, I'm not
available.
here endorsing that we go
So that's my hesitation.
to -1, but I mean, if this becomes a
Yeah.
philosophical debate,
Yep.
who has the power, then
Well-
they have the power
Yes.
to say, I will not endorse it.
We'd love to have.
And the only comeback we have is to say, if you do that, you gotta look them all in the eye and say, here's what's gonna happen.
But Mike, we do this every year.
I hear that, but
Every single year we have done this.
that's the way our charter's
We have
set up.
come understandable.
But,
Go ahead.
I mean, to Mike's point, if the goal here is, I've personally made a decision, I'm in this 1.5% to 2% range. Now, and I know I'm gonna have to go in and really convince the Board of Finance through objective reasons to support that. Quite honestly, the most powerful way to do that is to go in with what they've asked for. That list, show them what the impact is. There's some very compelling elements to that. If you're really giving me the best opportunity to have an objective conversation with the Board of Finance in a way that I can influence that, fulfill their process, give them that information, and it just takes out of the whole conversation, well, how do you know? Because you didn't
Right.
look at it, or
Right.
we asked you to do this, or you're not respecting us and we're accountable for the budget. And I am very cognizant of the reasons not to do it. I think there's very good labor relation. Personally, if I was on the Board of Finance, I never would have asked for this. And one reason would be just understanding labor relations. You don't ask people who've sacrificed a lot to all of a sudden get in a big discussion of, well, you've sacrificed, but we don't really care. So, but with that said, if you're asking me the best way to be able to go in good faith and say to the Board of Finance, I'm working with you in good faith, would actually be to have that list. So, I think,
Because I'd go one step further. When you mentioned that point, Burke, about at 0.5, minus 0.5, there's a diminishing return. To me, that's going to resonate to all 6 of them right away. That there's no point in even going lower. So maybe the discussion is, hey guys, this math only works down to 0.5, and if you do 0.5, here's what's going to happen.
Right. Okay.
The catch 22 that we've discussed, and nobody's taken this exercise more seriously than Matt, to put real time and effort into where would you find these cuts, and then when you get to the impact statement level, if you're too specific about it, now to explain the impact, you have to be specific about those programs. So that's the catch 22. I mean, we can run the number of positions impacted by general class, but once you start getting into who we're talking about by program, it's that communication piece that Matt wants to both give the information to the Board of Finance and fulfill it, but at what risk to morale, and what time for the staff here to go and communicate and explain why each and every program is on that list. That's our real rub.
And I
So
appreciate
maybe
all
we
that.
can find that line of we're going to comply, but not going to get as specific unless we absolutely had to.
Here's the 2-part question to that is, at some point, to where Lydia just said, this has been going on for 6 years, right? At some point, the collective wisdom of the 8 here are going to say to the Board of Finance, no more, right? We're done. And if you don't approve it, there'll be a stalemate. So this is just sort of an exercise in what are we all going to do? Or you come back to them and say, here's the real cost of what you're doing, which includes not only the dollars and cents on this page, but to the point you just raised, the morale, the expense, all of that stuff to get to something if they're really not going to do it. And that's the discussion maybe you can have is, are you really going to go there? Because now you're starting to talk about, is this board going to go, I don't think so. I'm willing to roll the dice with the town on a higher, to Chris's point, on a higher number even. Because that's the question. Are we going to go through the Board of Finance to get to the town?
I think what worries me, Mike, about putting together a list like that is my fear that now we have to justify what's going to stay and what's going. They're going to try to cherry pick our budget. Is I guess my fear that they're going to decide what's worthy and what's not, and that concerns me.
I agree. I think that happens now. I think to a certain extent that happens now.
Yeah.
It is happening
We've
now.
seen it with the
Has
capital
happened
improvement
now.
budget forever, and I think that's my fear with giving them that level of detail, is they're gonna cherry pick what's worthy of our budget.
I agree. I mean, having sat on both sides, it already happens. I mean, when they get this line item,
I know. And this, I feel
what's
like.
this? You
Right.
know?
See, I actually feel if I'm a member of the Board of Finance, to Mike's point, I'm the person accountable for the budget. I actually have an obligation to look at the detail, to cherry pick it. I have a right to do that. I have an obligation. Because the Board of Finance is the entity that moves the budget forward to the town.
But then
I'd like the debate to be
understanding.
I'd like the debate to be a debate of content, not process. I'm a believer when half of my energy is going into defending the process, I'm already losing the ability to focus on content that I believe indisputably is to our advantage. Let me put it that way. I think we have arguments here that result in an indisputable conclusion that will be more supportive of us. So what I don't want to do is be diverted into an argument over process that I actually think is hard for us to completely win. I think I'm comfortable going back strongly, when I say strongly, not informally, but formally going back and saying we're struggling with this. We want to have a conversation. And part of it, to Lydia's point, is we never really had that upfront conversation of the context of those variables. I'm willing to do that, but I also, if you ask me what's the most powerful way to have the overall conversation, it would be to have the list. But it's got to be one of those two. I just don't want to.
But how do you do the list? Do you do it in broad strokes, as you kind of just said, hey, X number of FTEs, without, discerning who and how?
I mean, I understand the desire to do that,
I mean,
but if you're trying to demonstrate impact, that's not going to give you impact.
That's right.
And in a town where we talk about unique experiences for kids, until you talk about a unique experience, I don't know that you have an impact. You know?
It's actually, I mean,
it's tough.
Right. For me, it actually becomes a pretty easy answer. If the public process pushes me into having to evaluate, a negative 1%, and it's going to upset employees, ultimately the answer is easy. I have to say to employees, you gotta ride with us. Unfortunately, this is the public process, and it is a public process that has this at this point. So if I have to prioritize between those two things, denying the public process of examining something that we've been asked to examine, and versus upsetting employees, I'm gonna have to choose to fulfill the public process. I think it's just the most powerful way to actually convince the public to our point of view.
But, okay, Chris, my job as a Board of Education member, and speaking, my job is to protect the school system that I serve, that I was elected to. My job is to do the best job I possibly can to serve the children of this district, which we have not mentioned the word children or students. Have we mentioned in this whole entire time? Usually,
I hope I have. I tried to weave it in there a couple times.
If I haven't, remind me, please, because I always write a note how many times
we
I've said
did.
it or
I
not
think we
say it.
did,
But,
yeah.
but that's my job. That's what I was elected to do, was to protect the integrity of the school system from here on forward. And I think when you look at the impact here, everything in this import, this is a very, lack of better words, heavy impact on here, because everything here is about support. Everything is in here for what? It carries a lot of weight. And not only, I'm looking at district leaders here on this, it's also the parents of the district. It's also the teachers, it's also the support staff of the district. It's everyone within the district. Kids feel this. Your children feel this in your schools. They understand that the big people here, what we're doing. And they know that, and it impacts them. When children feel that, they're going to bring it home, and parents are going to feel that, and it's going to circle around. So to get to where we were asked to get, I think my job is the impact part of it, but to go out to that far, for what? Knowing full well this board does not support getting lower than this because of this whole side of this impact, where it's going to put this district this year and in the future. And I'm concerned of what have we resolved from that.
I think we give them the list, and we give it to them, sort of as a per your request, and with a definitive statement that we don't support going below whatever number we think is the right number. If it's 1.0, fine. But, I think we make a definitive statement that it's not a list that represents things which we believe are worthy of consideration or that we'd support.
I agree with that, because the flip side of that is either you give them everything, or you say, this is our number,
Right.
and that's it.
But what I think the important part about giving them the list is we can't be unwilling to have the debate, and we can't be unwilling to justify our view of the budget, of what we need. We gotta do it. That's, and I appreciate the fact that doing that list may have a negative impact on the morale of the folks in our district who work very hard every day, but it is what
Hold
it
on.
is. I think we have
I'm
to
going a
go
little
up
different
to-
than I think. I'm saying, if you, the bigger debate is you tell them all the way down to -1. Or you say, okay, in our collective wisdom, nothing less than this. I'm never even gonna consider it. So, if you go against it, fine, now there's a sort of battle of the boards. Who's gonna blow through that?
Well, I think that's a debate that maybe at some point does have to go out to the taxpayers, maybe that's the only way it's gonna be resolved, is that we put our budget forward, the Board of Finance rejects it, and they put a number together that they draw up, and it goes to the voters. Maybe we're gonna get to that point, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, that's how the system is supposed to work. And we make our case, and they make theirs, and, look, I think we'll win it on the facts. The fact is that people have sort of the proverbial enlightened self-interest, right? They agree to pay a higher tax rate to get a better school system. I think it's a fool's game, in my opinion, to do things which would reduce the performance of our school system to the average, and then expect that people are going to be comfortable paying substantially more taxes to get the average. That's not a winner. So I think if you reduce the performance of the school system, you undermine home values. It's that simple. People are going to say, I'm not going to do that. I have a limited amount that I'm prepared to pay. So I think, what we're doing by providing the funding necessary to maintain the level of performance of the school system is supporting people's home values. The link is indisputable. It's direct. The evidence for it is very clear. And I think we'll win if we go to the taxpayers on that basis and explain it, especially given where we've been. I think we'll win that debate, and I think it's a debate we should be willing to take on. Give them the information.
Oh, are we losing the third? If I'm given a choice of, we send this to them and say we go no further, versus looking at a list all the way down to -1, I'm going to prefer the latter. But if what we're willing to do is go to the Board of Finance and say, we've worked very hard on this, this is as far as we go, without a further conversation with them, and a further justification from them that there's a real value to doing it, because we don't feel there's a value to do it, and we don't support it.
I like that, because the -1 came from a certain expectation that that's going to lower the tax rate. And if there's other ways that we can work together with the Board of Finance, through some of the variables,
Right.
Maybe the -1 doesn't need to be -1. Maybe it can be a 1.
Does the
Maybe
Board of
it can-
Finance
it
know
can be
about
2.
the
Yes.
0.5 piece?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know if the entire board knows. When Burke and
They
I
do.
went through that legislation,
They do.
I had called Peter and just, tried to talk through that a little bit. So I'm just trying to, kind of circle the wagons here a little bit and try to get some direction. We have the 25th, which we did put aside specifically for the purpose to discuss different scenarios, one of which we've done tonight, and it's certainly got, a reaction in terms of impact that it would have. I can certainly talk to the Board of Finance about the willingness to try to get together and have a conversation about what this looks like at this point. This is where we are in the process. This is the impact as a result of that, and how the board collectively feels in that conversation, kind of what's next. I don't know how the timeline matches up. I think I need really tomorrow to look at that, but I think we could get some good direction on if we can have an open dialogue, potentially a 3-board meeting, or at least a dialogue between the Board of Ed and, to your point, Chris, the entire Board of Finance on what this looks like now. This is new information. You have new information. What does that look like in terms of trying to achieve the goal that you set forward as a Board of Finance, was to keep that mill rate consistent? how does this play into it? And as a result, is it necessary to go any further? We may not be supportive of that, but if you want to see the impact, we're prepared to show you the impact. And we go from there.
I
And I think that kind of meets all the different needs and all the different, scenarios we could come up with. And it's process oriented, to your point. I mean, we're not bucking the process, but we're saying, does this new information and where we are in the process change your mindset a little bit with the factors that you have? Does that make sense? Okay.
I think that goes back to the initial dialogue conversation that we did not take place
what I'm-
back in,
right.
November,
Right.
December?
That's what I'm getting at.
The original.
Right.
when-
Because, instead of a
You start doing
presentation,
Right, when
we should have had a
that.
conversation.
Right, and I think that was where we were going.
So we still have the meeting on the 25th, and if we need to do that, we can do that. And, I can be
Try
in
to
touch
get
with
in
them.
with the Board of Finance
Yeah, I can be
prior
in
to
touch
the
with them.
25th.
Yeah, I can be in touch with them tomorrow in terms of what does that timeline look like. We also had the 4th, which was a swing date we were kind of holding on to if we needed it. So we would have 2 additional meetings where we could have more conversation as a board prior to March 11th, which would be the date to move forward and approve budget.
We have to
a little bit
vote
of
by
time.
March 11th, that's
Yes.
our draft
That's-
date.
Yes.
That's it.
Because the presentation to the Board of Finance
Is
is
that.
scheduled for the next day,
All right?
12th.
Right.
You don't usually cut that.
Okay. We good with that? Okay, so I think that wraps the budget conversation for tonight, and we have a couple other pieces.
Yes, we do. We do. We do. Now we are going back to the Exhibit 3, Facilities Enrollment Task Force Update.
Great, Lydia. So as Matt had shared all throughout his budget, we're looking at responsible actions in response to a number of many factors, but declining enrollment is certainly one of them. And the Facilities and Enrollment Task Force came back together at the end of January to look at a proposed recommendation given to the board last year regarding a modular removal plan of 3 years to see what progress we have made thus far in that 3-year plan. And as we said we would, to come together in these winter months to look at any changes in enrollment and therefore any possible changes to that initial 3-phased recommendation. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to share with you the outcomes of that meeting back on January 23rd and to share with you a recommendation from the task force regarding a modification to that initial 3-year phased-in modular removal plan. So just to remind the board, this was our original proposed timeline, and as we have shared in the past months, we have taken 2 major steps in that phase 1 of modular removal, both at Tooten Hills, which was completed this past summer, and 1 white modular at Latimer Lane, which again this past summer was removed. Initially, in this proposed timeline, Central School, their modulars were to be looked at for removal this upcoming summer of 2014, and then the remaining 2 modulars at Latimer Lane in the summer of 2015. Okay? So, and again, we had said at that time that the last 2 phases were dependent on projected enrollment versus actual. So when we looked at that this year, a couple of things happened. Latimer Lane's enrollment declined a little bit more than we initially thought, and Central's did not. And in looking at those factors as well as some others, it's the recommendation of the Facilities Enrollment Task Force to make a modification to actually flip-flop phases 2 and 3 so that Latimer's remaining modulars are removed this summer and Central's the following summer. So a couple of pros and cons regarding this modular recommendation, and I'm going to focus on the pros. So again, as I shared, Latimer Lane is anticipated to decrease 2 sections, allowing for that modular removal, which we didn't initially anticipate. And those modulars, if Board of Ed members have seen them and may recall, are definitely more dated than Central's. Central's enrollment, consequently, has remained steady. They're not experiencing that decrease that was initially projected, and again, we have updated projection numbers from NESDEC. The physical condition of those modulars are much better, and if you'll recall, Central's modulars contain one of our 2 preschool sites. and they are very much self-contained in that regard, as well as some related services. There's also to note a monetary penalty to the district if we remove Central's modulars prior to a 10-year placement, and they were put in place in 2005. So that's another pro in kind of reversing or making some modifications to that proposed timeline. Just to give you a little bit more information on Latimer Lane's configuration, they have 28 regular classrooms, and this is, again, assuming that modular removal. Of those 28 regular classrooms, 8 currently are used for the services, a combination of the services that you see there. That leaves 20 available classrooms. That's what we're slated to project at next year, and in the coming month, or in the coming years, I apologize for that, not the coming months, the coming years, is to be well within those guidelines of that 20 classroom use. Okay. It is to be noted, though, that we are going to be tight, particularly for next year, if we make this switch. We are projected for 20. We feel comfortable with those projections, and that's what we'll have for use of those 20 available classrooms. If something pops, then we are going to have to be creative on some of those shared spaces around special ed, related services, music, art, reading intervention. But again, we feel comfortable with this recommendation.
Sue, the class sizes at Latimer, is there a little cushion within the class sizes in those projections?
We are not up against the high end of those guidelines.
That was my
to your
question,
point.
yeah.
To your point. Our kindergarten projections are looking very good. And so those are one of the areas that I worry about most, as are our first grade. And so again, we are not on the high end of those guidelines, and we are still well within those guidelines, to your point,
There's a little
Susan.
room for moving.
Yes, there is, as projected. So that would be the proposed modification, the recommendation, again, that flip-flop of going with Latimer first this summer and then Central, but I bring it to the board for your consideration, and Susan, Tara, and Mike also sit on that committee as well.
I think I'm in that dated category with Latimer, because I remember when they were put on. I remember when the 4 classrooms at Latimer were built with the stipulation that they were the hard classrooms were built because the modules were coming off right away. So, in that little box right
A couple years ago.
Dating yourself a few years ago.
So I don't know if there's any additional comments from Board of Ed members who also sit on that committee.
I think it was well discussed. I think it's been discussed I think it's been well thought out, and a good plan is in place. And that board is a great board, and it's wonderful to have a town like this where we have that many volunteers who are helping on that board, who come with guidance and skill set that is very helpful to bring all this information in one place. It's a great board. It's a good, I think they're doing the right things and they're making the right choices.
I think your presentation answers the question that I get asked. That's why I asked it before. Is, hey, would an acceleration of this kind of make sense? And if so, why can we do it? My other thing is the timing is the same, so it'll be done over the summer and completed such that it's not a big deal, right? And it's included kind of. I remember last time the cost. There was kind of an upfront cost, and that's built into the proposed budget.
That is. So certainly I can comment to globally on some next steps of the Facilities Enrollment Task Force, but I would recommend that a motion be made to accept the revision in this phased plan.
Do I hear a motion?
I move that the Board of Ed amend the modular classroom plan and approve removal of the remaining Latimer Lane modular classrooms during the summer of 2014.
We actually have to make a motion first to create an action.
So I have the
item.
first motion,
It was on
Mike.
the reports. So.
right, because it was under, so I need the motion to move the Facilities and Enrollment Task Force recommendation to the action item. So Mike
So
will
moved.
move. Tara? Well, any discussion?
Aye.
Tag team over there.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Lydia,
Sec-
just one question, just so
Yes.
we don't get hung up. Can we do that?
Move it to an action item?
Yeah, without notice?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'm all for it.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Before I get on to the second motion, thank you, Mike.
Checks it off.
Can I have a motion?
All right, you want me to start again?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Move that the Board of Education amend the modular classroom plan and approve removal of the remaining Latimer Lane modular classrooms during the summer of 2014.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. All right, we move that. We are now.
So-
onto-
Lydia, just
Oh, I'm
in
sorry, go ahead,
closing, no,
continue.
that's perfectly fine. Just wanted to share that, to the points made here around the Facilities and Enrollment Task Force, we are collecting further data based upon, okay, what does the landscape look like with projections, with post-modular removal, again, after this Phase 3, and we'll be coming back together in the coming weeks to take a look at that data, and then we'll be sharing any outcomes of those meetings and those discussions, of course, with the full board.
All right, thank you. And moving on to our final information report, Exhibit 4, the 212-213 audit reports.
Right, you have a two-page exhibit, brief summary, which takes the town's comprehensive annual financial report, or CAFR, that was completed by the town finance office. And then there's also, as a part of the audit, that's performed a federal single audit report, as well as a state single audit report. We have some extra copies of all of these, so if anybody wants to check one out, we can get you a set. There's several of those left. And generally, we're just highlighting here that the overall town and Board of Education final budget was a surplus. And you see highlighted that we had favorable results in the overall general fund balance as of July 1st, 2012. There was a $10,077,000 balance, and as of June 30th, 2013, it was $11,654,000. So a healthy increase, and the unassigned general fund balance that is not committed to other funding is $10.8 million as of June 30th, 2013. So obviously, that goes into that Board of Finance conversation that I think they had at the last meeting about the willingness to look at reserve levels and collection rate levels in a different light, perhaps. In terms of our contribution from the Board of Ed to the year-end operating surplus of $73,470, the Board of Ed portion was $9,505, of which the non-public school portion was $535. So we've continued to try to not turn back monies that are needed for our district, but also not to over budget. On the second page there, we also just give a bit of a summary of what happens with the reserve for capital non-recurring expenditures, and we also see that fund balance grew over the course of the last fiscal year, 12-13. And then finally, the management letter that the auditors attached. Happy to say there were no issues identified for the Board of Education, and there was a update of last year's comment about suggesting that we develop an overall accounting procedures manual for our finance office along with the town, and we are continuing to do that. And I just want to really highlight the work of our town accountant budget analyst, Kara Sheen. She did the interfacing with the auditors this year. We also had some added agreed upon procedures that the auditors are doing, and the results of that will be coming back soon. And she's handled that really, really favorably. And I just thank her publicly. So if there's any questions on this or what's in here, like I said, get a copy and we can discuss it further.
All righty. Thank you.
Did they give you a sense of timing on when those other procedures were gonna? I know that was.
I think it's expected. I think it's expected within a matter of weeks. Yeah, it's very close.
All righty, any other further questions for Burke? All righty, anyone want to request a CAFR? Give your name to Burke.
Shoot me an email. Let me know after the meeting, whatever.
Get right on that.
Bring you one.
Aside for you, so. We are now at our second public audience. Anyone wishing to address the board may do so. Seeing none.
I'd like to recognize that all of our, we're talking about, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to, never mind. Go right in.
You think, great minds think alike. as Tara was saying, I'd like to recognize, I think from the whole board, that our administrators and principals are sitting here before us. And I would like to make note to the public watching that they came, and they are all here, representing each of the school, representing each of their staff and their students. And they are part of this process also, as we talk about process of what we do to further our school system. So we thank you very much for all the hard work you have done, the time and the commitment and the hours that you have put forward and put forth with administration to make the decisions in our job, I want to say easier, but also to help us in the decisions that we have to make in going forward, especially in this budget process. So thank you very much for coming, and we hope we haven't kept
We
you
appreciate your
Thank you,
commitment.
out too late. So.
Great team.
And I'd also like to thank SCTV for taping the program, and those of you who have missed it, this really was quite a very exciting budget meeting. And
Once again, and again, on
you may
SCTV.
watch this again, also along with Assistant Superintendent Erin Murray's program that she had done recently, and we do these once a month. So please stay tuned, tune in, and with that, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? We are adjourned. We will see you on February 25th, 2014. Thank you, and have a good evening.